He asked me not to tell Tom and Samantha, and I never told them. But I'm saying it now because
This is the story of how a senior member of the royal family tried to warn Thomas Markle that his daughter might destroy his reputation after his death. In 20 years before Thomas lay in a Philippines hospital with his leg amputated, someone inside the palace saw what was coming and tried to stop it. And what Lady Colin Campbell reveals about Meghan's alleged hidden agenda is disturbing. Calculated, and according to royal insiders, has been in the works for years, waiting for the moment when Thomas can no longer defend himself. The warning came in 2020, shortly after Thomas Markle appeared in a television interview that aired on ITV in Britain, and Lady Colin Campbell, a well-connected royal commentator and author with deep ties to the British aristocracy, received a phone call from what she describes as a quite senior royal, someone high up in the royal hierarchy with insider knowledge. The message was urgent and disturbing. There was concern within palace circles about what Meghan might do after Thomas Markle dies, and the fear was specific and chilling. According to Lady C, the royal told her that the concern within the palace was that Meghan would make false allegations of abuse against her father once he was no longer alive to defend himself. Once he couldn't speak up to deny the claims once his voice had been permanently silenced by death. The royal asked Lady C to contact Thomas and warn him about this potential threat, suggesting he should give testimony on tape in a legal setting, creating a record that could be used in court after his death if Meghan ever made such allegations. But that wasn't the only warning Lady C received about Meghan's potential plans, because she claims that separately, she was approached by someone she describes as a household name in this country, a famous person acting on behalf of one of Harry's closest associates. This person allegedly told Lady C that Harry had said Meghan couldn't reconcile with her father because Thomas used to interfere with her, and in British English, that word interfere carries a specific and serious implication of sexual abuse. Lady C says she exploded when she heard this allegation, that she used every expletive possible in her fury, and that she immediately contacted her American and English publishers because she was writing her book about Meghan and Harry at the time and needed to address this serious claim. She knew the allegation wasn't true, pointing to Meghan's own public statements about her father, including the glowing 2014 Father's Day tribute, where Meghan wrote lovingly about Thomas taking her to dance classes, supporting her dreams, and teaching her to find her light. Lady C also pointed to speeches where Meghan praised Thomas for championing her as an 11-year-old, describing him as someone who believed in her and supported her ambitions. These public statements, made when Meghan still needed her father's support and before she had royal status, contradict any suggestion of abuse and show a daughter who genuinely loved and appreciated her father. Lady C then contacted Thomas Markle directly and asked him about these allegations of abuse, and according to her detailed account, Thomas confirmed that none of it was true, that he had never abused his daughter in any way, and that he was absolutely horrified that such a thing would be suggested. Lady Colin Campbell has stated publicly and repeatedly that she would fly anywhere at her own expense to testify in court that Thomas denied these allegations if Meghan ever makes them. And that's a serious commitment from someone putting their reputation on the line. The fact that these warnings came from within the royal family is profoundly significant, because this wasn't tabloid speculation or internet rumors or gossip from people with no real knowledge. According to Lady C, this was a senior royal someone with insider access and knowledge, someone who had observed Meghan's behavior up close, someone who had seen patterns that concerned them enough to break protocol and reach out to warn Thomas about what might be coming. Lady C kept this information private for years, respecting Thomas's request not to tell his other children, Samantha and Thomas Jr., about the warnings. But in December 2025, as Thomas lay in a hospital bed recovering from having his leg amputated, as Meghan sent that letter through lawyers with video recording. As the situation reached a crisis point that threatened Thomas's remaining health and dignity, Lady C decided the threat was too serious to stay silent about anymore. She's essentially putting Meghan on notice by going public with these revelations. We know what you might be planning. We've warned Thomas. We have testimony from Thomas denying these allegations. And if you try to make false claims after his death, there will be people willing to testify against you, people with credibility and connections who won't let you destroy Thomas's reputation without a fight. The implications of Lady Colin Campbell's revelations extend far beyond just Thomas Markle's individual situation, because they suggest a pattern of behavior that's been recognized and documented by people at the highest levels of the British establishment. When a senior member of the royal family takes the extraordinary step of contacting a royal commentator to warn about potential false allegations, that's not casual conversation or minor concern, and that's not someone with limited knowledge making assumptions. That's someone with insider knowledge, someone who has observed Meghan's behavior in private settings, someone who has seen how she operates behind closed doors, someone who has witnessed patterns that concern them enough to break the usual rules of royal discretion and reach out to protect Thomas. The royal family is notoriously private and protective of their own members, even former members, so for a senior royal to warn about one of their own, even someone who had left the family by that point, AS speaks to the seriousness of their concerns and the credibility of the threat they perceived. Lady C's willingness to put her reputation on the line by going public with these claims also matters significantly, because she's not some random internet troll or tabloid hack making things up for attention or money. She's a respected author with connections throughout the British aristocracy and royal circles, someone who has written multiple books about the royal family that have been taken seriously, someone whose information has proven accurate in the past when checked against other sources. When Lady C says she'll fly anywhere at her own expense to testify in court that Thomas denied these allegations, that's a serious commitment that could have legal and financial consequences if she's lying or exaggerating. She's not hedging or equivocating or hiding behind anonymous sources or vague claims, and she's putting herself out there, naming herself as a witness, offering to testify under oath, and staking her reputation on the truth of what she's saying. The pattern Lady C describes, where Meghan allegedly told Harry that Thomas used to interfere with her, fits disturbingly well with other patterns we've observed in Meghan's behavior over the years. She has a documented history of rewriting narratives to make herself the victim of making claims that don't hold up under scrutiny when examined by people who were actually present, of presenting a version of events that serves her interests regardless of the truth or the harm it causes to others. Meghan claimed she and Harry were married 3 days before their public wedding, creating a romantic narrative about a secret private ceremony, and the Archbishop of Canterbury had to publicly correct that false claim, explaining that what happened was a private exchange of vows, not a legal marriage. Meghan claimed she didn't know much about the royal family before meeting Harry, presenting herself as naive and unprepared for royal life, and her friends contradicted that claim, revealing she'd been fascinated with Princess Diana and the royals for years before meeting Harry. Meghan claimed she was suicidal while living at Kensington Palace and asked for help, but was denied, making serious allegations about the royal family's treatment of her mental health, and palace staff disputed that account, saying proper channels and support were available, but Meghan didn't use them or chose not to access them. The pattern is consistent and clear. Meghan makes dramatic claims that paint her as a victim, that generate sympathy and support, that serve her narrative of being mistreated. But when examined closely by people with actual knowledge, these claims often fall apart or get contradicted. So when Lady C says that Meghan might make false allegations of abuse against Thomas after his death, it's not coming from nowhere, it's not based on nothing, and it's not wild speculation from someone with no knowledge. It's based on a pattern of behavior that's been observed by multiple people over multiple years, including people within the royal family itself who had access to see how Meghan operated in private, how she treated people behind closed doors, how she constructed narratives that served her interests. The fact that these concerns were raised back in 20 years before Thomas's current medical crisis shows this isn't a reaction to recent events. This isn't something cooked up to explain Meghan's current behavior. And this isn't a narrative created after the fact. This is something that people close to the situation have been worried about for years, something they saw coming based on Meghan's patterns, something they tried to warn Thomas about so he could protect himself before it was too late. The question now is whether Thomas took that advice, whether he gave testimony on tape that could be used after his death, whether he created a legal record that would allow him to defend himself even from beyond the grave. Thomas Markle Jr.'s protective stance, his vow that Meghan won't get within 20 feet of their father, takes on new and deeper meaning in light of these revelations from Lady Colin Campbell. Thomas Jr., isn't just protecting his father from emotional harm or PR exploitation, and he's potentially protecting Thomas from interactions that could later be twisted or misrepresented from situations that could be used as evidence of abuse or mistreatment. From moments that could be taken out of context and weaponized against Thomas after his death. If Meghan visits Thomas and he's confused or disoriented because of his stroke, if he says something that could be misinterpreted, if there's any interaction that could be filmed or recorded and later presented as evidence of his abusive behavior. Thomas Jr. wants to prevent that from happening. He's not just being overprotective or paranoid about his sister's intentions, and he's responding to genuine concerns that have been raised by people who know Meghan's patterns, people who have observed her behavior. People who have warned that she might try to destroy Thomas's reputation after he can't defend himself. Samantha Markle's lawsuit against Meghan for defamation also fits into this larger pattern of the family fighting back against Meghan's attempts to rewrite history and control the narrative. Samantha knows that if Meghan can successfully establish a narrative where the Markle family is toxic or abusive, where Thomas was a terrible father who mistreated his daughter, then any claims Meghan makes about abuse will be more believable to people who don't know the truth. That's why the fight over the narrative matters so much right now, while Thomas is still alive, and that's why Thomas Jr. and Samantha are so vocal in defending their father and pushing back against Meghan's version of events. They're not just defending themselves and their own reputations, and they're defending Thomas against accusations that haven't even been made yet, but that they fear are coming, accusations that could destroy his legacy and his reputation after he's gone. The letter Meghan sent in December 2025, with its legal documentation and video recording, could be seen as part of this larger strategy of building a case and creating a record. Meghan is creating documentation, building a paper trail, recording her attempts at outreach in ways that could be used later to support whatever narrative she wants to create. If she later claims that Thomas was abusive and that's why she couldn't have a relationship with him, she can point to this letter and say, "I tried, I reached out, I made an effort. But it was too difficult because of what he did to me, because of the abuse I suffered." The video recording of Thomas receiving the letter captures his emotional state, his trembling, his fear, his vulnerability, and if Meghan wanted to, she could present that footage as evidence of Thomas's guilty conscience, of him knowing what he did and being afraid of being confronted about it. Never mind that Thomas was trembling because he was afraid of being hurt again by his daughter, because he was vulnerable and scared and hoping desperately for reconciliation. And never mind that his fear was about what the letter might say, not about being caught in some past abuse. Meghan could reframe that video to serve whatever narrative she wants to create, and Thomas, who can barely speak because of his stroke, who is elderly and vulnerable and might not survive much longer given his declining health, might not be around to provide his side of the story to explain what really happened to defend himself against false allegations. That's the nightmare scenario that Lady Colin Campbell says senior royals were worried about back in 2020, and that's what they tried to warn Thomas about so he could protect himself. The timing of Lady C going public with these revelations in December 2025 is significant and strategic because she kept this information private for years, respecting Thomas's request not to tell his other children about the royal warnings. But when Thomas had his leg amputated, when Meghan sent that letter through lawyers with video recording when the situation reached a crisis point that threatened not just Thomas's health, but potentially his legacy, Lady C decided the threat was too serious to stay silent about anymore. She's essentially creating a public record of these concerns, a record that predates Thomas's death, a record that can be pointed to if Meghan does make allegations later, a record that shows people were warning about this possibility years before it happened. She's trying to prevent the destruction of Thomas's reputation by making it clear that such attempts won't go unchallenged, that there are people who know the truth, that there's testimony from Thomas denying these allegations, and that false claims will be fought in court if necessary. Whether this will be enough to deter Meghan, if that is indeed her plan, remains to be seen and depends on factors we can't fully know. But at minimum, Lady C has created a public record of these concerns, documented the warnings that were given, established that people were worried about this possibility years ago, and made it clear that Thomas has defenders who will fight for his reputation even after he's gone. For Thomas Markle, lying in that hospital bed in the Philippines recovering from amputation, the situation is almost unbearably tragic on multiple levels. He's an 81-year-old man who raised his daughter largely as a single father, who sacrificed everything for her success, who worked 75-plus hours a week to give her opportunities, who believed in her dreams when no one else did, who loved her unconditionally, and who now faces not just abandonment during his medical crisis, but the possibility that after his death, his daughter might destroy his reputation with false allegations he can't defend against. He's lost his leg. He's lost his ability to speak clearly because of the stroke he's lost, his financial security because he bankrupted himself supporting Meghan. And he might lose his reputation and legacy as well if Meghan carries out what royal insiders fear she's planning. All because he made one mistake in 2018, staging those paparazzi photos before the wedding. A mistake he's acknowledged and apologized for repeatedly. A mistake that in no way justifies 7 years of complete estrangement and the potential destruction of his character after death. The secret plot that Lady Colin Campbell has exposed isn't just about one letter or one hospital visit or one moment of abandonment, and it's about a long-term strategy to control the narrative. To position Meghan as the victim of abuse to justify the estrangement with claims of mistreatment and potentially to make allegations that will be impossible to disprove once Thomas is gone and can't speak for himself. It's calculated, it's cruel, it's strategic, and according to people at the highest levels of the British establishment, people with insider knowledge and access, it's exactly what they feared Meghan might do based on observing her patterns and behavior. Thomas Markle deserves better than this from the daughter he raised and supported, and he deserves a daughter who would visit him in the hospital, who would call him on the phone, who would show him love and compassion in his final years, rather than potentially planning to destroy his reputation after he's gone. Instead, he has a daughter who sends letters through lawyers, who documents everything for potential future use, who focuses on her own grievances rather than his suffering, and who, according to royal insiders who tried to warn him, might be planning to make false allegations of abuse after he's dead and can't defend himself. That's the shocking truth that the royal family tried to expose through their warning to Lady Colin Campbell that Lady C has now made public to protect Thomas, and that Thomas Markle is living with every day as he recovers in that Philippines hospital, wondering if his daughter will ever show him mercy or if the worst is yet to come after his death. The hidden agenda that royal insiders exposed isn't just speculation or theory, and it's based on observed patterns of behavior that multiple people within the royal family recognized as dangerous and potentially destructive. When senior royals take the extraordinary step of reaching out to warn someone outside the family about what one of their own members might do, that's not casual gossip or minor concern. And that's recognition of a serious threat based on first-hand observation of how Meghan operates behind closed doors. The royal family has every reason to stay silent about internal matters, to protect their own even when those members behave badly, to maintain the facade of unity and propriety that's essential to the monarchy's image and legitimacy. For them to break that silence to reach out to Lady Colin Campbell with warnings about Meghan's potential plans suggests they saw something genuinely alarming in her behavior. Something that concerned them enough to risk the exposure that comes with warning Thomas? What did they see that worried them so much? What patterns did they observe during Meghan's time as a working royal that made them fear she would make false abuse allegations after Thomas's death? The answer likely lies in how Meghan handled other conflicts and disagreements during her time in the UK. How she framed narratives to make herself the victim, how she was willing to make serious allegations without substantial evidence, and how she showed no hesitation in damaging the reputations of people who couldn't immediately defend themselves. The Oprah interview provides a template for understanding what royal insiders might have feared regarding Thomas, because in that interview, Meghan made serious allegations about racism within the royal family, about being denied mental health support when she was suicidal, about Kate making her cry, all presented as facts when many of these claims were later disputed or contradicted by people who were actually present. The willingness to make such serious allegations on international television, knowing they would damage the royal family's reputation, knowing that the people she was accusing couldn't immediately respond, shows a pattern that would naturally concern people who care about Thomas. If Meghan was willing to make unsubstantiated allegations about racism against the royal family, if she was willing to claim she was denied help when suicidal, without providing evidence that she actually sought help through proper channels, if she was willing to reverse the story about who made whom cry to make herself look better, then what would stop her from making similar allegations about Thomas after he's dead? The pattern is consistent. Make serious allegations that generate sympathy, position yourself as the victim, damage the reputation of people who can't effectively respond, and use the resulting narrative to justify your own behavior and choices. The royal insiders who warned Lady Colin Campbell weren't being paranoid or overprotective, and they were recognizing a pattern and trying to prevent Thomas from becoming its next victim. They saw how Meghan operated. They understood her willingness to sacrifice other people's reputations for her own benefit, and they knew that Thomas, as an elderly man with declining health who had already been estranged for years, would be particularly vulnerable to this kind of posthumous character assassination. The specific allegation that Harry allegedly told his associate that Thomas used to interfere with, Meghan, is particularly disturbing because of how serious and damaging such a claim would be if made publicly. Sexual abuse allegations are among the most serious accusations that can be made against anyone. They're nearly impossible to disprove, especially when the accused is dead. And they permanently destroy reputations in ways that can never be fully repaired, even if later proven false. If this allegation was indeed circulating in 2020, even in private conversations, it suggests that Meghan and Harry were already testing narratives, already floating trial balloons to see how such claims might be received, already laying groundwork for potential future allegations. The fact that Lady Colin Campbell heard this from what she describes as a household name, acting on behalf of one of Harry's closest associates, suggests it wasn't just random gossip, but rather something that was being discussed in their inner circle. Lady C's explosive reaction to hearing this allegation, her immediate contact with her publishers, her decision to address it in her book, all suggest she recognized the seriousness of what was being suggested and understood that it needed to be confronted and refuted before it could take root and spread. Her subsequent contact with Thomas to get his denial on record was an attempt to create documentation that could be used to fight back if these allegations ever became public. The fact that Thomas asked Lady C not to tell his other children about these warnings is itself revealing, because it suggests Thomas understood the seriousness of what was being suggested but didn't want to alarm Samantha and Thomas Jr. or create more family conflict. He was trying to protect them from the knowledge that their sister might be planning something so cruel and destructive, trying to shield them from the pain of knowing that Meghan might destroy their father's reputation after his death. But now that Lady C has gone public with these revelations, now that Samantha and Thomas Jr. know about the warnings from royal insiders, their protective stance toward their father makes even more sense. They're not just protecting him from emotional harm or PR exploitation in the present, and they're protecting him from having his reputation destroyed in the future, from having his legacy tarnished by false allegations he can't defend against, from being remembered as an abuser rather than as the loving father who sacrificed everything for his daughter's success. The hidden agenda that royal insiders exposed is about narrative control, about positioning Meghan as the ultimate victim who was abused by her father and mistreated by the royal family, about creating a story that justifies every cruel choice she's made and every relationship she's destroyed. If she can successfully establish that Thomas abused her, then her 7 years of estrangement become understandable and justified her refusal to visit during medical emergencies becomes self-protection rather than cruelty. And her abandonment of her father becomes a brave act of boundary setting rather than heartless neglect. That's why the fight over the narrative matters so much right now, while Thomas is still alive and can still defend himself even if only through proxies like Lady C, Thomas Jr., and Samantha. Once he's gone, once his voice is permanently silenced, the narrative becomes much harder to fight because there's no one who can say, "I was there, I raised her, I know what really happened." And none of these allegations are true. Without Thomas's voice, Meghan's version of events becomes the only version, and false allegations become much harder to disprove. Lady Colin Campbell's decision to go public with the royal warnings in December 2025, as Thomas lay in a hospital bed recovering from amputation, was strategic and necessary because the threat had become too immediate and too serious to stay silent about anymore. With Thomas's health declining, with his ability to speak limited by the stroke, with his life potentially shortened by the amputation and its complications, the window for creating a public record of these concerns was closing. Lady C recognized that if she waited much longer, Thomas might die before the warnings could be made public. And then it would be too late to establish that people had been concerned about false allegations years before they were made. By going public now, Lady C has created a permanent record that predates any potential allegations that shows senior royals were worried about this possibility back in 2020, that documents Thomas's denial of abuse allegations. And that establishes a timeline that makes it harder for Meghan to successfully rewrite history after Thomas's death. If Meghan does make allegations after Thomas dies, people can point to Lady C's revelations and ask why these concerns were being raised years earlier if there was no basis for them. Why royal insiders were warning about false allegations if they hadn't observed patterns that suggested such allegations might be coming. The hidden agenda that the royal family tried to expose through their warning to Lady Colin Campbell reveals something profoundly disturbing about Meghan's character and her approach to relationships, because it suggests she's been planning for years how to control the narrative after her father's death, how to position herself as the victim even as she abandons him during medical emergencies, how to destroy his reputation to justify her own cruel behavior. Whether she actually makes these allegations after Thomas dies remains to be seen, but the fact that people who observed her closely enough to fear she might do it, that's revealing enough about who she is and what she's capable of. Thomas Markle deserves better than to spend his final years worrying that his daughter might destroy his reputation after he's gone worrying that the loving father he was will be rewritten as an abuser. Worrying that his legacy will be tarnished by false allegations he can't defend against? He deserves better than a daughter who, according to royal insiders, has been planning this destruction for years, who has been laying groundwork and testing narratives, who has been positioning herself to make allegations that will be impossible to disprove once he's dead. The secret plot that Lady Colin Campbell has exposed, the hidden agenda that royal insiders tried to warn Thomas about, reveals the depths of Meghan's willingness to harm others for her own benefit, the extent of her planning and calculation, and the cruelty of someone who would not only abandon her father during medical emergencies, but potentially destroy his reputation after his death. That's not just neglect or estrangement or family drama, and that's calculated destruction of someone who loved her unconditionally and sacrificed everything for her success. And it's a level of cruelty that's difficult for normal people to comprehend or accept as possible.